Good evening, everybody. My name's John Parrott. I'm a communications consultant, and I'll be chairing this forum this evening. I'm just going to give it a few moments as the participant numbers are gradually increasing. So if you just bear with me for a minute or two, just to allow people to enter the forum, and then we'll get going. Okay, well then the numbers are still going up gradually, but it's approaching 2 minutes past, so we will begin. Firstly, welcome to this Avery South Community Forum this evening. As I said, my name's John Parrott. I'll be chairing this evening on behalf of the Greater Cambridge Partnership. We have we have a maximum of 2 hours for this tonight. We'll try and get through it as quickly as possible, but acknowledging that there'll be probably quite a few questions that we've got. The session is being recorded, so if you can see that, it isn't recorded, and that's because, as usual, GCP record them and then place it onto their YouTube channel for those who aren't able to make it tonight. So please bear that in mind. And then I'll just read out the agenda for this evening. First up, and sort of the main event that we're going to have this evening, as it's in the middle of a public consultation, is Making Connections. That's going to be presented by Peter Blake. We were then meant to have a presentation on CSET 2, but unfortunately, due to unforeseen family circumstances, the project managers had to pull out at last minute, and we don't have a replacement to that. So I'm very sorry about that. But the project team will be able to provide a written update on the A1307 CSET Phase 1 scheme in the coming weeks. So apologies, we've had to drop that for those reasons from the agenda. Peter Blake will then stay on and just give a very brief update on CSET 2. And then we have Ben, who will be presenting on Whittlesford Parkway, Anna on the Southwest Travel Hub, Chris on Greenways, and then finally Paul on Cycling Plus. So what we'll do is I'll ask the presenters, they will share their screen and they'll run through their presentations uninterrupted. At the end of their presentation, they'll take their presentation down, and then you can raise your hand and I can unmute you to ask a question. If you prefer to do it in writing, please look at the bottom of your screen, and there's a button there called Q&A. Please use that, because this is much better than a chat facility. Post your question in there, and then we will run to them. We may answer some of those in the interest of time. We've got some people on here who may answer some of those in written format, so you'll see the answers that will go into the answer questions, and we'll provide them. Where we're not able to answer that like that, then I will be reading them out and presenting it back to the presenter. So that's it. That's enough from me. And as I say, those CSET 1, Whittlesford Parkway, Southwest Travel Hub, Greenways, and Cycle Plus will just be brief project updates following Peter's presentation on Making Connections. So without further ado, I'm going to mute myself and hand over to Peter to give that presentation.
Thanks, John. Hopefully you can all see that. So we're in the week 6, I think, of our consultation on Making Connections. I've got a few slides that I'll go through relatively quickly, hopefully to allow as much time for question and answers as possible, which we'll take at the end. So the challenge, many of you are aware of this, is the reason for the city deal being established. The challenge that we face in our geography is that we are a growing area. We are hugely economically successful, 35,000 more residents in the last census compared with 10 years previous. We've got plans for 44,000 jobs, 33,000 homes, significant significant challenges that creates with traffic, transport and congestion on our highway. And that's really where the city deal commenced its work. But in the last few years, we've clearly moved into the environmental and the air quality issues. So we recognise the role that transport plays of local carbon emissions. We recognise the number of deaths associated with poor air in the greater Cambridge geography. And so what we've been doing is developing a series of proposals for the city environment that are currently out to consultation. It's not the sole part of our work. As many of you know, you interact with us on many different schemes. So we're progressing work on 4 new busways, replicating the success of the St Ives to Cambridge busway, significant additional capacity into travel hubs and park and ride sites, so 10,000 more spaces planned, recent approval for the Cambridge Southwest travel hub scheme, which you'll get an update on later on. Progress with new greenways. We've done previously schemes in the city, so Histon Road complete, Milton Road in construction at the moment, and then working with partners on things like rail connections and integrated parking strategies and the like. But the work on the city environment is the focus of this evening, and it's something that we've been talking about for a number of years. So we've had a series of consultations that date back to 2017, 2018, in terms of how do we really tackle the problems of a car-dominated environment and all the problems that gives us in Cambridge. The most recent consultation, the end of last year, pardon me, strong support for many of the themes around tackling carbon, emissions, pollution and congestion. Strong support for the bus network and also promoting walking and cycling and reducing traffic to deliver on that. And then conversations and thought pieces around how we might go about doing that in terms of charging regimes, which form the focus of the consultation that's ongoing at the moment. So there are 3 key areas that we're consulting on, and I'm going to go through them all in a little bit more detail. Transforming the bus network, so really making sure we've got a bus network that deals with and can deal with the challenges that we face in terms of our growing geography and the need to get more people on public transport. Further investment and further improvements in sustainable active travel modes, so more cycling schemes, greater priority for pedestrians in the city environment. And the mechanism through which we deliver revenue funding to fund the new bus improvements, and also we manage down the number of vehicles in the city environment, is a sustainable travel zone. So it's a charging zone where people would be charged to drive during charging hours, certain times of the day and days of the week. So the bus network that we're focusing on is a much wider geography than the greater Cambridge geography. That's the travel to work area, and all the evidence suggests that we need to improve the bus network across that wider area. So significant reductions in fares, investment in tap-on, tap-off ticketing, higher frequencies on many of the services, both within the city environment, but also in the market towns. So 4 to 6 buses now are on many of the routes from the market towns, hourly bus services across much of the rural area, supplemented by demand responsive transport, building on the success of the Ting scheme in West Huntingdonshire. Much longer operating hours, and then an investment in infrastructure, in vehicles, in depot capacity, and in charging infrastructure for those electric vehicles that would be required. So really a very different public transport network than we see in our geography, and indeed across many geographies in the UK today at the moment. Further investment in sustainable travel. Cambridge is a cycling city, but some of the cycling connections are really quite poor. There's lack of priority of people within our environment, an awful lot of road space that's assigned to private vehicles. And what we're looking to try and do is to refocus that. So how do we place people, walking, cycling, pedestrians at the heart of our city? And what do we need to deliver that? We're delivering segregated cycle routes on the Greenways network, but we're not delivering segregated routes through the city because the city is too heavily congested at the moment. So finding a way to deliver that, making sure we deliver priority for pedestrians at every junction, cycle parking, secure cycle parking, given the increasing price point for vehicles, and then improving space, and then looking at other modes such as car clubs and how we may develop them in the coming period. And then the final theme, and this tends to be the theme that catches the media attention, is the area of the sustainable travel zone. So this is a charging zone, and we're proposing a weekday charge 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. Vehicles are charged to come into the zone, and they're charged to move around the zone. So, and all that money would then be ring fenced and invested in the public transport, walking and cycling improvements. We're proposing a start date of 27-28. Maybe it's introduced earlier at maybe peak time or for larger vehicles, but that's all part of the conversation and consultation that's ongoing. We very much want to hear people's views on how that might look and feel. So the charges will apply across the Cambridge urban area. Graduated charges, so cars £5 a day, and then rising through LGVs and HGVs. Discounts for bus services, discounts for Hackney carriages and private hire vehicles. But again, all part of the consultation that we would welcome people's views on. There's also quite an extensive series of discounts, exemptions and reimbursements that we're proposing. Many of these are built upon the experience from elsewhere, so London, Birmingham, Bath, other schemes of this nature. But some of them are reflecting our environment. Blue badge holders, for example, we're suggesting get 100% discount. People on lower income, so maybe linked to council tax, again on a tapered discount. And then working with health, social care and charity partners as to how we can manage exemptions and reimbursement arrangements so that GP home visits and home care visits aren't impacted by the proposals. So as I say, the charge across the urban area of Cambridge, Monday to Friday, 7 till 7. And this slide tries to sort of outline what it might look like if that happens. So if we introduce this alongside the public transport improvements and then the walking and cycling improvements, where the technical assessment is there will be a significant reduction in traffic. So 50% reduction in vehicles within the zone charging time, and then a move to more sustainable modes. So a significant increase in public transport, 40% increase across Cambridge, 30% across that wider geography that I showed you earlier on, and then 60,000 more walking, cycling journeys within the city. And all at the same time as generating a ring-fenced pot. It's got to be ring-fenced. We would be obliged to publish on an annual basis where any income was spent. And that's an investment opportunity year in, year out to fund those bus services, those significant reduction in fares, £1 anywhere in the city, £2 anywhere on that wider geography. That supports the sort of the refocusing and the changed environment within which we will be operating. At every stage that civic leaders have discussed this, and as I said, we've been talking about it since 2017, 2018, they've made clear that public transport improvements need to come first. So nominally, the GCP Executive Board has assigned £50 million to forward fund improvements subject to this consultation and of course, subject to future decisions. But that money would then be invested in public transport improvements in advance of any charge coming in. So this is an indicative timeline that says, well, we're currently consulting up till the 23rd of December, consultations ongoing. The GCP and county colleagues may well be in a position by the middle of 2023 to take a decision one way or another. And if they took a decision, and if they said it was 27-28 introduction for the charge, then by the end of 2023, we'd be in a position to lower fares. That's actually the easiest thing to deliver. We then be working on the implementation plan for ramping up operation of additional bus services. So training, recruiting more drivers, acquiring more vehicles, more depot space, more charging capacity, because we want electric vehicles. And so over those 4 years, the public transport would be improved in the run up to any charge coming in, say, in 2028. And again, that's up for consultation. That's part of the considerations that we're asking you and local communities to consider during this current consultation. My final slide, and then I'm going to take them down and we'll open it up to questions. So this is just a plea to get involved. Thank you for coming this evening. We've got a number of online events, a number of in-person events, and all of the information is available on the website in terms of the consultation. So thank you, John. I'll take the slides down.
Thank you, Peter. I'm just looking at the questions that are coming in now. David Plank, I'm conscious. I see that I've received your questions anyway, and I see that you've put them in the chat, and you've also got your hand up. Please bear with me a second, David. I'll welcome to you in a second. And just to remind people that when in the Q&A, the written questions, when they are answered, they pop into the answered section. My colleague Alistair is busy answering questions there. So the first question, it was more of a comment really, but I will read it out. Peter, it's just on some of the statistics that are in your slides. This is from James Littlewood, stating that 44,000 jobs and 33,500 homes by 2031 is not more on top of the 2021 figure, because it includes growth from 2014. So it's just challenging that statistic. I don't know if there's anything you want to say in response to that, Peter.
Yeah, James, and as you'll know, in terms of the nature of the current local plan, then actually there's an awful lot of back delivery. So we have Waterbeach, Bourne, a number of large sites coming on later in that plan period. And actually, what we've not raised and what we're not talking about is the emerging local plan, and those proposals will place from 2031 increasing pressure in terms of our geography.
Great, thank you. The next question, it was the one from Anonymous one about defining traffic, but Alistair is typing that, a written response to that. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next question, and then David, I will come to you because I know you've asked a few and you've got your hand up. So this next written question is from Councillor Sam Davis, and what he's asking Peter is that he's confused. Sorry, Sam, forgive me, I can't remember whether you're Sam, male or female, so forgive me if I got that
Sam
wrong.
is a female.
Female, sorry, Sam, my apologies. I'm confused by who is providing the definitive description of the scheme's operation. See, for example, the FAQ posted today by Cambridge Labour, who makes 2 points I have seen nowhere in GCP's literature. First one being A, about retaining congestion charge revenue locally, even if national road charging is introduced, and B, about free car trips for residents who register for the scheme. I think that means register for an account, as far as I'm aware. Could you point me to the sources of those statements in the GP literature? Or should we disregard them by statements made by anyone who's not a GCP officer? Sorry, there's a lot in there, Peter. Did you?
Yeah, I mean, I can only comment on the GCP and the consultation position, Sam. I mean, the issue of accounts will come up should decision be taken to go forward. And the idea of account is it makes it cheaper and easier for everybody to manage their transactions. And if that's the case, I'm quite sure maybe 3 days would be for considerations. But I can only talk about what's up for, and we've published as part of our consultation. I can't talk on political parties.
Right, thank you very much. Sorry, David Plank, I see your hand's gone down now, but do please put it up. I see that Alistair is busy sort of answering your questions, but if you do want to talk, put your hand up. Matthew Chester has his hand up. So Matthew, I'm just about to unmute you now if you want to get ready, and then you can verbally ask Peter the question yourself. You are now unmuted, Matthew. I think Matthew's unmuted. It's still saying mute, George. I don't know if I've done something wrong there. No, you're all good, Matthew. We should be able to hear you now.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Peter, for the presentation. I am a resident in Trumpington, and I am interested in all of this, obviously, which is why I'm here today. But I'll make a couple of points. One, I found it very difficult even responding to the first question of the questionnaire, because I felt that it was putting the cart before the horse. And to back that up, today I received a leaflet through the post about the new Cambridge bus network, which talks about frequency, but it doesn't talk about timings into the city and how long it takes. And to my first point, it was really confusion as to a lack of infrastructure detail to provide for me to be able to answer the questions. So, for example, on Trumpington Road, you see double-decker buses stuck in traffic with one person on them. How are you going to put in place infrastructure on Trumpington Road to enable that for that not to happen in the future?
Thanks for the question, Matthew. In the first instance, experience teaches us that if you introduce a charge of whatever nature and over whatever geography, traffic levels go down. Yeah, and so in terms of the queuing that we already experience in Trumpington Road and many other roads across our geography, if you introduce these proposals, there would be significant less traffic. So on day one, there would be a lot less queuing. Then I think there are considerations that we, county council, or other authorities would want to think about in terms of, well, actually, if we need to give less road space to traffic, what should it look like going forward? But actually, all of our modelling and technical work says the speed of buses will be greatly enhanced by taking half the traffic off the road. I think then there's a question of, do we need to provide any further supporting infrastructure or not? In some cases, they've needed to do that. In other cases, London took 20% of traffic off the network, and journey times initially speeded up. So I think it's important that we recognise there will be an immediate benefit, but also that we might need to do some further work. And you may well be aware, and I think one of the questions that we received in advance was around the road hierarchy review. So one of the reasons that we undertook the road hierarchy review was to start and understand some of the principles that we might apply to using our network going forward, with or indeed without any proposals for making connections. So I hope that's helpful, but please, in terms of your consultation response, make the points around infrastructure, and we can clearly reflect further.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Peter. Matthew, I'm going to move on now. I notice your hand is still up, so please leave it up if you've got a follow-up question, and I will come back to you. Otherwise, if you're happy with Peter's answer, please take it down. Richard and Joan, I see you've got your hands up. Please bear with me for a second. I'm just going to try and do things in order and take some of the written questions, but I keep your hands up. I will come to you. So Elizabeth Burley is asking, will the charge affect people living in the city, e.g. from outside the city, e.g. Trumpington, and going to elsewhere to work? Peter.
Yeah, the consultation proposals that are out there would include city residents as well as non-residents. The reason for that is the majority of, a small majority, 53% of traffic on our network is generated by postcodes within the city. So we need to reflect that in terms of our consultation, and that's out there in terms of the proposals. But again, I fully expect to receive comments on that as part of the consultation.
Great, thank you. Timothy Stone, Alistair, you raise a very interesting question about examples of other European countries that have had charging. Alistair's typing that, so for the people who are interested, please look in the answered question once that is done. I'll just go to one more written question, then I will come to you next, Richard, and then you, Joan. So where were we? Steve Oliver, you haven't asked a question yet. Oh, you've asked three questions, Steve, but I'll ask them all. Will the residents within the controlled zone have to pay the full charge? Is his first question, Peter.
So in the consultation at the moment, residents would pay a full charge. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. What are higher charges to be levied? What are higher charges to be levied on school buses?
School buses. School buses would be exempt, and we're working with, or we will be working with education colleagues as to how we would manage that approach.
Great, thank you. And Steve's final question is: what plans are there to segregate pedestrians and cyclists? And he follows it up with a comment that the present arrangements are unsatisfactory and in places even dangerous.
So we've published, we did some work 18 months ago now on what we've termed the Cycling Plus network, which is the sort of first steps of how you improve the cycle network across the city. We've identified 13 routes that we can commit to now. And we would be able to deliver more of them because we would have the money to do it, and also, critically, the space to do that in terms of getting far more segregated cycle solutions. But actually, then it then sort of comes back to Matthew's question earlier on that says, if you have less traffic in our city, we can use the highways and byways in a very different way. So I think there then would be a series of questions as to what we might do with the network if there is less traffic, and how much space could we give over effectively to other modes, walking, cycling, and general public space within the city environment.
Thank you, Peter. Richard and Joan, thank you for bearing with us. Richard, I'm going to come to you first. Richard Williams, I'm just unmuting you now. And you should be still showing as muted, George. Matthew Chester.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Richard Williams. I beg your pardon. You can hear you, Richard. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for the presentation. I've got three questions, if I can. Firstly, I think some clarity on bus charging would be useful, because there is contradictory information out there. So if I'm, one of my residents in Whittlesford, and I need to get from Whittlesford to, let's say, the Cambridge Science Park in the north of Cambridge, under these proposals, I'd have to get a bus from Whittlesford to Sawston. I'd then have to get a bus from Sawston to somewhere in the city, and I'd probably have to get a bus from somewhere in the city to the north of Cambridge. So how much would I pay? Would I be charged 3 separate journeys there, or would I just be charged one journey? Because contradictory answers seem to have been given about that. If I could just have another quick one, we'll just do quick ones. Gaps in the network. I represent 4 villages on South Cambs District Council. There is no service offered for Heathfield, which has got a significant population, so people in Heathfield wouldn't benefit from this at all. It would seem they'd have to walk to Triplow or potentially Whittlesford or Duxford to get a bus. So that there are gaps here. And then the third question is a question about the impact of all of this on traffic in South Cambs. I'm sure Peter's will know about the modelling work, so the percentage changes in modal trip distribution as part of your background documents with a £5 charge seems to indicate that actually the model predicts a 15% increase in traffic within South Cambs and Cambridge, and the report specifically acknowledges that there could be those increases in car journeys as people try to avoid the travel zone. So basically we could have a displacement issue. So I'd be grateful for some comments on that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So you'll be charged once for the Whittlesford journey under the proposals. I don't know the proposals for the village off the top of my head. I mean, if you go onto the website, you can use the interactive tool. But if there's no listed public transport offer, then there would be a demand responsive transport service that we'll be looking to provide as part of these proposals, and that might connect with the local hub, rail or bus hub, or the main bus line. And the traffic reduction is an interesting one, and I think we were caught on a presentational issue there. Traffic reduces in South Cambridgeshire as a result. The report that you reference shows that less traffic crosses a border because people have more incentive to use public transport or other modes. So traffic across South Cambridgeshire reduces, I think off the top of my head, 4 or 5%, but I can double check that and provide you with an update. It doesn't increase.
Great, thank you, Peter. Thank you for those questions there, Richard. So I'm going to go to there are a number of there are a number of questions, Peter, coming in about sort of bus services and bus service cuts and etc. So I'm going to try and collate them as best I can. Sorry, Alistair, David Plank has put I think a follow-up question in there at the top at 608. If you could just have a look at that and with his questions, please. So this is an anonymous question here, Peter. How does the 50% reduction in car journeys impact journeys outside of the STZ? What congestion will there be at the park and ride sites in peak hours? And then is the comment following that is often the M11 has tailbacks in peak morning from existing congestion.
Yes, it does. The M11 does, A14 does, increasing problems. What we're seeing, actually, we're seeing the impacts of the new A14 opening on our network. And so those strategic roads are operating at higher levels than they were pre-COVID. And that's going to get significantly worse. So under the growth that this area is facing, that's going to get 20% additional traffic, going to lead to 20 to 30% additional congestion. In answer to Richard's question earlier on, traffic levels generally fall within South Cambridgeshire anyway under these proposals, and the park and rides is part of the answer. So we're already committed to we're already committed to significantly expanding park and ride, and we're working on 10,000 additional spaces in the next few years anyway. But some people will choose to use park and ride. Some people will choose to use the bus offer that actually is closer to their to where they live. And that balance is the nature of the proposals that we've put out. So the queuing traffic on the M11 at Trumpington is actually not to get into the park and ride; it's to get to the biomedical campus. And so one of the opportunities here is if we can take traffic volumes down, that means for the vehicles that then use the network will be freed up. And then going back to questions earlier on about how do we provide better bus services? One of the ways we do that is the buses don't get caught in the same traffic as everything else.
Thank you, Peter. Joan Monk, I see your hand has gone down, so I'll assume that your question has been answered by someone else, but please do put your hand back up if it hasn't, and sorry that it's taking time, and I'm endeavouring to do these in order. John George, I see you've patiently got your hand up. I'm just going to read out one more question, John, then I will come to you. And this is a question, Peter, from Michael Stables. It's along the exemptions and discounts fund, I think. And Alistair's typing, but I think this is an important one, Alistair. So I'm just going to ask it of Peter anyway, just so that people can hear. So the question is, how will you decide who is too sick, too weak, too disabled to travel by car without a charge to visit Addenbrooke's, for example? At what point will this decision be made and by whom? And how will appeals be handled? For example, someone may not be too weak at the start of their journey, but may become weak due to fatigue. That's the question, Peter. If you're able to answer that.
Yeah, we are not medical practitioners, so we will be relying and working with and supporting NHS, GP and other colleagues to make those decisions. The intention here is not to set up entirely different eligibility frameworks. We'll build on the experience from elsewhere and be working with the qualified specialists to make those decisions.
Great, thank you. And I see Alistair is adding some points about the to those ones about the buses and the bus cuts. Michael, I see that, and in response to that, you have just raised your hand, so I will just unmute you, just if you've got a follow-up question there. You are now, Michael, should, with maybe some help from George, be able to speak in a moment. Michael Stables. Still showing on mute, George. Apologies. There we go. Michael, you're unmuted now if you want to just ask your follow-up question.
Oh, okay. Am I coming through?
Yes, you are. I can hear you, Michael.
Yeah, that's great. So this particular thing stood out very much for me as somebody who visited Addenbrooke's about 25 times over the last couple of years for appointments, and generally I just come by my own car and park it in the multi-storey. I have to say I've never had a problem doing that. I'm just fascinated to know how you're going to find this information out from GPs, because even myself, I'm actually unable to decide whether you wouldn't be able to, for example, contact a GP in advance of an appointment and say to them, do you think I'm too weak, too sick, too disabled on this occasion to make my journey by car without paying £5? I think we also have to factor in that I was actually in hospital for a month, had several visitors, a visitor every day. That visitor would have had to pay £5 every time to visit me, which would have run up quite a big bill. And then just as a follow-up, for about a year, now maybe 6 months to a year, I worked at a company based, I think it's called the Quadrant. It's up near the airport. And I come in from South Cambridge, so I drive in. To do that job, see, I could only get there in the car. Would have cost me £25. But at the time, I didn't have a disability badge because I hadn't felt the need to apply for it. So I just felt why, under those circumstances, I wouldn't actually have been able to get to work by bus. It would have been far too uncomfortable, inconvenient, would have taken a lot longer to get there. I just wondered what the benefit for me would be to leave the car at home, queue up for a couple of buses, attempt to walk 15 minutes, which a 15-minute journey for a possibly able-bodied person would take me about 40 minutes. I just wondered what the appeal would be to me. I mean, personally, I would just pay the £5 charge, and I'm quite puzzled, really, why you've assumed such a big drop in traffic, because I have the feeling keep running into the car anyway. I'm just rather puzzled where all this charging business has come from, really, because it also seems to be quite unfair on people on lower incomes, who are obviously going to be the ones who won't be the ones affording to pay it, which I think is the same issue we get with when we go into ULEZ zones and things like that. It's often the poor who get priced off the road.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And there was a lot of questions in there, so I'll just hand over to Peter to sort of to answer them, and then
I'll try and pick. There's a lot of questions there, Michael. So the example you've given is exactly why we've got an exemptions, discounts, and reimbursement set of proposals, and we need to work with health authorities, with the social care providers and the like, to make sure we get that right. But there's already reimbursement proposals, reimbursement arrangements at the at Addenbrooke's. Because there's subsidised parking for certain groups, and that's managed very effectively through the process. So we want to build on that and make sure that we target these effectively. You raise visitors, and actually, yeah, we are under the proposals. We are proposing to charge visitors, but visitors are charged to use the car park at the moment, and the car park on the biometric campus is not cheap. The other side of our package is saying that we are putting in place significant improvements to park and ride services, including Trumpington, which we mentioned earlier on, and that would be £1 return. £2 return, £1 each way, with much more regular operations running much later into the evening. So we would be providing the alternatives there. Lower incomes, again, we've sort of picked up in terms of discounts and exemptions, and we're keen to explore that as part of the consultation. Why a charging zone? And that sort of takes us back to the start, that if we live in an environment that is very economically successful, but that places some real pressure on our environment, our local communities and our local roads. So congestion plays out. If you're on Trumpington Road, you live near Trumpington Road, you have, the significant impact with congestion. Coldham's Lane, significant. I could go on across our network. That's just congestion, let alone the air quality downsides, and also the contribution to the climate problem that all these vehicles on the road. So we've gone through a process that gets us here, that says, as part of the solution, but only as part of the solution, you need a sustainable charge that is then ring-fenced to a whole series of public transport, walking and cycling improvements that many members of the community could reasonably use. Not everybody, which is why exactly we're looking at discounts and exemptions, which is why we'd be investing in dial-a-ride type services, which is why all of the new vehicles were fully accessible on a London standard. A whole host of things that we would do to meet the particular challenges out there, and that's why we're consulting, because we want to hear back from people.
Great, thank you, Peter, and thanks for the questions, Michael. I'm going to, Richard, I see you've got your hand up again. I will come to you. We've got 20 minutes left on making connections before we get onto the other 5 updates. So I'm going to try and get through as many of the written questions as I can, along with Alistair and Jane, who are typing responses. So the next one, Peter, that isn't being answered in the chat is, I must say I don't entirely understand the question. What is the anticipated effect of introducing a better bus service, the carrot, before the stick, the road user charging, Peter? So it was obviously picking up on what you said in your presentation there.
Yeah. So the expectation is that if we can reduce fares, if we can make a series of improvements in the bus network, and we can't make them all. We can't put more buses on peak hour traffic in Cambridge because they're going to get stuck in the same queues as everybody else. But we can make a lot of improvements around operating hours, around services out with the city. The anticipation is that's a nudge in the right direction. So we may very well get relatively small increases in terms of public transport. Experience from London and elsewhere says that actually it's the charge that makes the difference in terms of travel behavior within the city. But when you do that, people need the alternative. So the alternative has to be in place, because otherwise, quite rightly, people could be saying, well, you're giving us no option but to continue to drive. So that's why these things need to be managed as part of any implementation plan, subject to the consultation, subject to any decisions. So people have the confidence that the public transport can be improved, and that's only improved by investing in it, which is where the £50 million ring fence money comes in. And then if you switch to a charging day, that the capacity exists and the public transport network exists that people can then avail themselves and take advantage of.
Great, thank you. Thanks for answering that, Peter, and thanks for the question. So I'm just going to one because I see that some have been answered live. So Lisa Teverson is asking, why are you not proposing a substantial discount or a number of free trips per household per week for residents, assuming that means residents within the zone, to get out of Cambridge?
So we are residents are included, as I said, because they contribute to the overall problem in terms of congestion and the other issues that we're trying to tackle. And I think that's up for consultation, Lisa. So we want to hear from people about how this might be managed. I've mentioned earlier on, or it was raised in questions, that one of the ways this might be managed going forward might be an account-based system that gives some flexibility, but we're not consulting on that yet because we're not at that point. We're consulting on the principles, we're consulting on who should be charged, where the discounts and exemptions should fall, and what the public transport improvements need to be, whether we've covered all the villages, whether we need to go further. So that's the nature of this consultation at the moment. We welcome people's views, and if the decision is then to progress, then we need to work on how we might fine-tune these details.
Great, thank you. The next question is from Mark Pilling. And Mark is asking, bus networks work best in high density urban environments. Cambridge is not high density compared to London. Why is there a belief buses will be a viable solution in Cambridge?
I think bus networks work best where they're invested in. And we have an opportunity here to provide significant investment year in, year out. So this isn't a one-off grant where we buy something nice and shiny and we cut a ribbon. This is about investing in services for the foreseeable future. And those services are then provided on the base of social need. So our growing environment, so maybe not focused on the city centre, focusing far more in terms of the areas that have grown in Cambridge over recent times, in terms of the biomedical campus, the West Cambridge side, the science park, investing in services that operate into our rural areas where there's always going to be lower patronage. but we're giving people that opportunity not to use the car and not to contribute to congestion or air quality or the carbon challenge. So I think investing in the bus network, and it's all aspects. It's new services, it's new vehicles, it's making sure we get the ticketing offer cheap and right and appropriate for our geography. I think that's a key component of the proposals, but it's only one part of it. We need to invest further in the public and in the active travel solutions, and we also need to find a way of managing our space a bit better by reducing the number of cars on our network.
Thank you, Peter. Matthew Chester's got a second question here, but it's one that hasn't come up tonight, so I'll ask it. So the question is, a road user charge is likely to increase property prices further within the zone. How does the scheme plan to support key worker accommodation in the city of Cambridge?
An awful lot of people can't afford to live in the city of Cambridge. An awful lot of people rely on the existing bus network to get in, or indeed they battle through the congestion. And so, one of the impacts of this scheme is to give a viable alternative over a much greater geography. So one of the reasons I showed you that map earlier on is to say we need to make improvements across a much wider area than either just the city or indeed Greater Cambridge, because that will then provide opportunities for people living in St Neots or Haverhill or Royston to have access to a viable alternative that is cheap, that is quick, and that is reliable. But you can only do that if you invest in the public transport and you reduce the traffic volumes within the city.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Matthew. Councillor Sam Davis has come back because she believes she didn't explain herself clearly, or maybe it was how I posed the question to you, Peter. But I'll read out what she's saying. So she's saying you wrote 50% reduction in traffic is compared to traffic levels that would be there in the future without the charge. The model builds in the expected growth in population and people travelling. So 2 questions on that, Peter. One is, will I notice a reduction in traffic level on city streets after the charge is introduced? She's saying presumably yes. And then supplementary question is, if yes, how many years will it take for traffic levels to rebuild to the level we are experiencing at the moment?
So the answer is yes. And we can only go on other experiences elsewhere. What tends to happen is you get the immediate reduction, and then there is a gradual coming back, but only by a few percentage points in terms of other examples elsewhere. And so what that means is if we achieve the 50% reduction, then it might come back, 4, 5, 6, 7% over a period of time. But a lot of that, it depends about how much we continue to invest in the alternatives. And do people like the look and feel and the experience of that environment and say, well, you know what, I'm going to continue to use my bike instead of the car, or I'm going to continue on the on the bus. But yeah, absolutely appropriate question to ask, and it's something we'll continue to review as we take forward any proposals.
Thank you. We've only got 10 minutes left on making connections, so I'm going to try and give as many people who haven't previously asked questions an opportunity to do one. John George, I'll come to you in a second with your hand up, but this question I'm going to read out is from Michael Kilpatrick, and he's following on from Richard Williams's question a moment ago. So saying, after the initial phases have hopefully shown positive results, will there be plans to link more locations, such as Whittlesford and Duxford, to the city with a direct route? Do you acknowledge that multiple bus journeys via Sawston or the Park and Ride may never appear competitive and practical against a £5 charge? Furthermore, do you accept that the railway is not always a better option than buses, with their flexibility of a greater number of stops en route? And so regardless of the existence of the railway, Whittlesford and Duxford would remain poorly served by the initial proposals.
I entirely acknowledge that people want the alternative, and the alternative has to work for them. For some people, like interchange, some people don't. What I would say is that the proposals at the moment are out for consultation, the bus proposals. So the detailed routes through Whittlesford or Duxford or anything else, then if we've missed something or you have a particular view, then please respond. And that, we're deliberately asking a lot of open questions in terms of the consultation to get that right. In terms of the wider question, will and should the bus network be refined and developed going forward? Absolutely it should. In terms of expressed need, in terms of demand, in terms of the continued development in our geography, which, as we said, is growing at quite a pace. We need to keep these things alive. It should not be set in stone. That won't help anybody. So I think, please respond with any details you've got already. But I think please be assured that, this bus network, if we deliver it, will continue to need to be refined, finessed, and changes will absolutely need to be made going forward.
Thank you. There are a number of people asking different questions and new people asking questions in the chat, which I'll come to in the remaining minutes. But John George, you've been waiting there patiently. So I am just unmuting you now, or trying to. Yeah, John, you're unmuted. If you want to ask Peter your question, please. John, can you hear me? John George. Okay, well, you should be unmuted. George, just check that, but it looks like John is unmuted, but I'm not sure if he's still there or he's having problems with his microphone. John, can you? Yeah, you just went off and on. So one final go. Okay, John. We'll if we've got time, we'll come back. Or please, John, if you are having problems, because it looks like you can talk. Please do pose your question. Apologies, I don't know why we're not hearing you. Please do post it in the chats. Alistair's still. John, I did hear something then. Are you still there? One last go.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, John. Yes, thank you.
Right, okay. Right, I don't think... I've been driving buses for 20 years. I'm retired now, and I don't think that anybody here knows enough about the bus industry. I mean, you keep saying, "Oh, we're going to have all these buses, and we're going to put £50 million in, so we can have all these buses." They can't get the drivers. They cannot get the drivers. The Fen Stanton depot at the moment is 18 drivers short. They just can't get them. The thing is, the job is it's very long shifts, and I've done it for a long time, and it's not it's not what you think. It's not what you think it is. And they cannot get the drivers. If they haven't got the drivers, it doesn't matter how much money you put into it, you cannot drive the buses. Also, Stagecoach, as you probably know, have been taken over by an investment company, which are only interested in making money. So I don't know how that's going to work either. And with these £1 fares, you're going to have to find a hell of a lot of money to actually make that work.
Okay, thank you, John. So 2 questions in there, Peter, obviously about driver recruitment and retention and about the fares, please. Thank you.
So the fares, we absolutely understand. It's a significant undertaking. It's a significant investment of many millions of pounds year in, year out. But in terms of previous consultations and feedback we've had from communities of Greater Cambridge, they've said that's an important part in making the bus network, fit for the future development of our area. Investment in a long-term investment in driver training recruitment is going to be absolutely necessary as part of these proposals. We fully recognise that. That's why I've talked about an implementation plan over a period of years, working to ensure that we can build the capacity, because at the moment the capacity isn't there, and it's not just in our geography. The capacity isn't there across the UK. There's an awful lot of bus networks that are feeling the strain, and what we're looking to do is to invest in it over a long period of time, and that will need investment across the board in terms of all aspects of it, including drivers, because as you say, if we don't have enough drivers or enough vehicles or enough charging capacity for new electric vehicles or enough ticket machines, then what we're going to achieve is going to become highly problematic. So we recognise that, and we factored that into the plans.
Thank you, John, for your question. Thanks, Peter, for answering that. Next question about park and ride sites. Anonymous post: are you going to increase the park and ride sites? And then it follows on, Peter: the local residents are going to pay for the buses, especially if outer Cambridge residents are going to bus in. What about pensioners and the affordability? also wanting to go out of the city to visit family. And then there's a statement at the end of this question saying that the belief that the scheme is based on able-bodied people who can cycle and walk.
Well, it's clearly not, because that's why we've got, fairly extensive £50 million per annum of public transport improvements. Pensioners will continue to get free travel, so that's a statutory requirement and would apply regardless. Park and rides, yes, we have got plans for further park and ride sites. You'll hear a little bit more about our Cambridge Southwest Travel Hub later on, but we have plans on some of our main corridors coming in, because we recognise that that's an opportunity for people to decide, well, I'm going to park my car up and I'm going to get on a bus, or I'm going to get on a bike, or I'm going to make that final leg of my journey in a different way, rather than drive onto city streets that impacts on our local neighbourhoods and on our communities in terms of congestion, poor air, and of course the wider carbon issue.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter. Rupert Gould, you've posted what I think is a comment and an opinion. It's not a question in there, but thank you for it. It's a good one, and it's in there as an open question if people want to read it. But I'm not going to pose it to Peter in the interest of time, because it's a statement rather than a question. So I'll move on to Kate Kell, who has asked, how have you evaluated the effect on females of this scheme? Women often provide unpaid care to older relatives, friends at the start and end of the working day. Their journeys will often be in and out and around multiple locations in the zone. How will this scheme help their day, bearing in mind, 1, the number of connections they may have to make, and 2, the time that would need?
So we are obliged to undertake qualities assessments on this type of scheme, and actually we've done far more than that. So we've published an impact audit online as part of the decision to go to this consultation, and this highlights what the impact may well be, both up and down, but positive and negative in terms of various groupings. We've got this consultation ongoing. We're working with stakeholder groups and focus groups to make sure that we capture all of the issues and all of the impacts associated with this. Some people do multiple journeys. They're not they're not just of one sex. They're of all sexes. We need to capture that information, and we need to make sure that consideration is brought and given to that as part of any final set of proposals. So that information is already out there in terms of our website. We'll be doing more on it. We'll be making sure that that's a key part of the decision-making process. And, as I said earlier on, whether that links to discounts or exemptions or better, enhancements to bus services or changes to the proposals, that's absolutely what impact assessments are designed to do, and that will be part of the process going forward.
Right. We're almost at 7 o'clock, but Joan Monk, you've had your hand up and down a couple of times and it's up at the moment. So I am unmuting you now. Joan, Joan Monk, you should be unmuted if you want to ask Peter your question, please.
Well, I've actually put it as an anonymous attendee, which was about the park and rides. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was the side of the fact that I've lived in the city all my life, and talking about this congestion charge, and I appreciate and understand all the aspects of it. But having said that, I have to leave the city sometimes to go and outside of the zone and look after grandchildren. And, the fact that it's 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. is a long period of time during the day. And I have to travel some distance to look after the grandchildren. So I'm going to be penalised for doing that by having to leave the city in order to go to Warwick and down to Sussex. So, I'm not going to get any exemption for that. So I'm not going to have to pay for that as a pensioner, and also I feel that if there are elderly people living in the city, which there are a lot of, that they're going to be isolated, because friends who don't live in the city, who are also retired, are not going to be able to come in because of the congestion charge. So they're not going to drive in. So it is going to isolate certain elderly people within the city, as already appreciate from one of the other questions about people caring for elderly people who are actually driving within the city boundary. I do think, obviously you're talking about no congestion charge for Saturdays and Sundays and after 7 p.m. But I do think that the 7 to 7 is quite a broad time for people to having to pay who actually live in the city and have done for many years.
Okay, thank you, Jane.
I appreciate about pollution and the every. I mean, I've been here since the 40s, so I know what the expansion rate has been, and about the biomedical campus and everything else that's marvellous. But of course, that is a problem, obviously, with increased population growth within the area. Yeah. I appreciate that, but of course, we're then being sort of. When people sort of say, well, you can get the bus and you can go to the supermarket on the bus, that's all very well if you can go on the bus to the supermarket. But how are you going to, if you're elderly, how are you going to carry all your shopping home? There's no consideration and thought of that. You can get on the bus and you can come home on the bus, but you've got to go from the bus to your house or your bungalow or wherever you live or your flat in order to carry your shopping. So, there are certain aspects that are sort of muted towards people who can walk and who can actually cycle. And, so I think there has to be some little give here with people who are not in that position to do that, who live in the city.
Okay, thank you, Joan. And just to sort of re-emphasise the point that Peter made, these are proposals because you are talking about the hours there as well. But I'll allow Peter to come in as this sort of final verbal question.
Yeah, we asked the question about the hours, particularly Joan, and we want people's views on it. We entirely recognise that for some people that poses a difficulty. Equally, pensioners who get free travel, if there's a significant improvement in bus services, there's far more bus services that they can use. And so that for some pensioners there'll be a financial benefit. Look, this is all part of a consultation, and we recognise and we acknowledge that there are impacts, but we are trying to resolve, or we're trying to come up with a package of measures that can resolve some of the really knotty issues that we've got. But that's why we're consulting on it. That's why we're doing sessions like this, and we very much welcome your views and your comments as part of the consultation.
Thank you, Peter. So I'm going to have one. It is just gone 7 o'clock. I'm just going to ask one question finally in the chat on making connections, which is from Ava, who's apologising for joining late, but no need to apologise, Ava. It's good that you're here. And Ava's question is, I'd like to ask if you are planning to optimising the current bus routes, Peter.
Well, we've put in a fairly significant set of proposals that actually reflect the changes that have happened over recent times in Cambridge. If you've got more buses that you can utilise, you might do things in a different way. So within the city environment, you might have some very high frequency core services. You may have far more orbital services. We're certainly looking at far more direct services to the park and to the key transport generators like the biomedical campus, like West Cambridge and Science Park, whereby maybe you don't have to necessarily go through the city centre. There are other ways of doing it. So clearly there's an established bus network. I think we're able to suggest if we put a lot more investment in, the bus network might look very different. But as was the question earlier about Whittlesford and Duxford, we might not have it quite right, and so therefore that's absolutely what we want to use this consultation for.
Thank you, Peter. So we are going to move on now. Alistair's still around for another 25 minutes or so. Alistair, there's some of them are comments and follow-ups, but there are some sort of new questions in the chat, particularly one there that I've just seen about quite an important one about bus safety as well. So Alistair, if you can answer as many of those as you're able in the background, please, and people will see them in the answered section. As I say, it's gone 7 o'clock and we've still got 5 project updates to get through. So thank you, everybody. We've had a lot of questions. Thank you to Peter as well on making connections, quite rightly, because it's out to public consultation at the moment. So thank you for engaging with GCP on that. So Peter, you've still got the mic and you're still on, because I believe you're going to give a brief update on CSET 2 now.
Yes, thanks, John, and it will be brief. People on the call may well be aware that the Cambridge South East Transport Scheme We undertook a consultation earlier in the year following the planning approval that was granted for the retirement village in Stapleford. We expect to be in a position to go to our board in March, in the February-March cycle next year, and that will determine next steps, including onward application for Transport and Works Act or other. And at the moment, we're still looking at, if all those decisions being taken, then we're looking at constructing and progressing with the scheme by sort of 24, 25. But the next step will be the executive board will review in February, March next year. Thank you, John. You're on mute, John.
Thank you. Sorry, rookie error. David, you're asking about the answered sections. If you open up the Q&A, I think, and George, it may be the case, I'm not sure that people can sort of see them, but there are questions answered in there. So you should be able to see a tab that's open and a tab for answered. But if my team can advise me that if that's visible or not to people, that would be good. Peter, sorry, before I let you go, there is a question in there that doesn't necessarily relate to making connections, nor any of the other presentations, unless I'm missing the point. But it's about how far away is Cambridge South Station, and just in terms of that's delivery, could it offer a valuable north connection to reducing traffic? Well, it is to do with making connections. It's all about reducing traffic.
Significant. So this is a significant piece of infrastructure. We, County Council, Combined Authority, invested in its early work. It was subsequently taken up by Department for Transport, currently just finalising the planning and consents process, but they are still working on Network Rail, or still working on the delivery by the end of 2025 calendar year, and they're still working to that timeline. So hopeful that will be progressed.
Great, thank you, Peter. So that's you done on the first two agenda items. We're going to now move on to Ben. Ben, if you've got your presentation ready, Ben's going to give a brief project update on Whittlesford Parkway. Over to you, Ben.
Okay, thanks, John. Can you hear me okay? Everybody can hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear, Ben.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll introduce myself. Hello, everybody. My name is Ben Hathaway, and I'm a project manager for GCP, and I'm currently involved in the early stages of the Whittlesford Parkway. So I'll just give you, tonight will be a very brief update of where we are. So in September 2022, GCP commissioned Atkins to review the previous report undertaken on the Whittlesford Parkway Master Plan by Tetra Tech. This was in 2018, so this was written in 2018. And also to undertake an analysis of potential changes in local developments, policies and guidance that may have an impact on the conclusions and options. So in 2018 was obviously pre-pandemic, therefore it may have an effect on expected commuter numbers, for example. And also the report being 4 years old, a lot of legislation and good practice can change in that time. So it's important to get it updated and so it's current and fit for purpose. So also Atkins were commissioned to re-engage with stakeholders to ascertain if opinions have changed or gauge any new considerations. This actually happened on October the 5th when we held a stakeholder meeting. They were also asked to assess options using the updated information. So the options and issues considered for this were step-free accesses to all the platforms within the rail station, improved safety and functionality of the station, poor accessibility to the station, to the railway station by bus, congestion on the A505, car parking, and also considering sustainable travel options to surrounding areas. Now that were the options the report was analysed on. So moving on, we were also had to ask them to provide a short list of options to be taken forward for further development. So the options shortlist is currently being developed by Atkins and GCP. Atkins are programmed to present the report with costing recommendations in early December 2022. So it is imminent. So it is a very, very current scheme at the moment. So that's the end of my presentation. I don't know if anyone's got any questions on that.
Let me just have a look at so James is asking, oh, hang on, there is a question from Timothy. James, I did say at the beginning of the presentation, but it may not be here. Apologies, the CSET phase 1 presentation, what we weren't able to deliver that tonight. The project manager had to pull out at short notice due to family circumstances. So apologies, but a written project update will be sent in the following weeks on that. So that's why we don't have that, James, in case you missed me saying that at the beginning. So Ben, we do. Who are the stakeholders with regard to Whittlesford Parkway?
Well, we have a list of we had a list of stakeholders, which are obviously local businesses and certainly organisations within the area, and these were identified, and Atkins engaged with these people.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just looking. I'm going to participate. Right. Richard Williams, you have your hand up, please. If this is, I know you've asked a couple of questions, so I'm assuming this is a question for Ben on this on Whittlesford. I'm unmuting you now, Richard. You should, you can talk now, Richard.
Yep, thanks. Yeah, I'm the district councillor for Whittlesford, so this is a different one. I just, I mean, I think we're all slightly intrigued by what this new report is doing, because it does look like some consultants reviewing the work of some other consultants. So I think we're all interested in the village as to what is actually going to come out of this new report and when we can expect some sort of concrete actions, because the previous report listed a lot of things that could be done, but actually when you looked into it, there was no funding really for any of it. And it all went very, very, very quiet for a long time. So I think we'd be interested to know what concrete action is likely to come out and why and when. And actually, just two other brief points. One, what's the link with the local plan? Because you probably know that this area is potentially a special policy area in the new South Greater Cambridge local plan. So I'd be interested in your views on the significance of that. And then just finally, linking back to what we were talking about before, making connections. The timeline of all of this doesn't really seem to match up, because there is I think a very real concern that if a congestion charge comes in Cambridge, that could well result in increases of traffic around places like Whittlesford, and not necessarily people going there to avoid the charge to get into Cambridge. It could also be people driving to Whittlesford instead of driving to Cambridge Central Station to go to London. So we could well see an increase in traffic, and we've already got parking problems around this station as a result of displacement from the congestion charge. And if nothing's been done to the station in the meantime, we're just going to have bigger problems of people parking all over the roads and the whole system breaking down. So what connections do you see with making connections, and is there a plan to match up the timelines?
Thank you, Richard. And I see Peter switched his camera back on, so it looks like he's about to answer this for us.
Yeah, it was Richard. So if I start, so I mean, we are aware of the local plan issues. Obviously, in terms of the previous Whittlesford work, it was caught up in the A505 strategic study, because obviously that limits the impact of what is deliverable, because that study is still ongoing. County and combined authority colleagues are progressing that. So the reason for doing the refresh at the moment is to say we do recognise the current challenges. Are there things that we can realistically deliver now? And I think once we've concluded that work, then we will be speaking with yourselves as the local representative and the parish council in terms of taking that forward. The link with making Making Connections is an interesting one. I'm sure you're aware that with another hat on, we are supporting South Cambridgeshire District Council and indeed the County Council in progressing civil parking enforcement. We recognise that there are particular pinch points in South Cambridgeshire at the moment where inconsiderate parking and inappropriate parking is an impact, and Whittlesford is clearly one of those areas where that's likely to increase significantly if use of the railway increases. And so we are progressing that. We're funding the introduction of that, and hopefully in the next 12 or 18 months, then we'll be in a position to have an enforcement capability on street to deal with indiscriminate parking at Whittlesford and other sites in terms of South Cambridgeshire. And that would then pick up some of the border issues that are associated with any proposals that come out of Making Connections. But as I explained, hopefully previously, they are subject to consultation, and we're in listening mode before we take any recommendations back to our executive board, perhaps the middle of 2023. So hopefully that helps, and it may be that once we've done a little bit more work on this refresh Whittlesford, then we need to come and speak with yourself and the parish council about what the way forward looks like.
Great, thank you, Peter. Ben, I saw you were nodding. Was there anything you wanted to add, Ben?
No, I think Peter, you've covered everything. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Just a little bit of housekeeping. David Plank was asking about saying that he couldn't see the answers to the question that Alice has been diligently answering for them. So Jane, I went and responded to him and asked if you could pick up his request for those answers, and then that's now moved my answer to the answer box. So Jane, if you could just have a look at that, please, and to the David's request for those answers. James Littlewood, I see you're asking to ask a verbal question, and you've got your hand up. So James, you are unmuted, James.
Hi, thanks. I'm speaking on behalf of Cambridge Past, Present and Future here. There's obviously two very important heritage buildings adjacent to the station. And in one of the earlier consultations, we highlighted our concerns with those, and I think Historic England have also highlighted concerns, but we never ever got a response to our responses and our concerns. And I don't know if we're one of the stakeholder groups, but we certainly haven't been contacted. And so I just want to be reassured that certainly some of the things I think which were being proposed weren't appropriate, I don't think, from a heritage perspective. And whether or not, I guess, to what extent is heritage going to be involved in this? And I'd like to avoid a situation where we're sort of campaigning against proposals because of the impact on heritage, and that hasn't been properly considered.
Okay, well, thanks for the question, James. So, and all I can say is that if you haven't been consulted, I can get your details now, and I can write to you offline or contact you offline to discuss the plan in a bit more detail as and when we receive it. So if that helps.
Yeah, thank you. That would be welcome.
Thank you, James. And if you don't want to share your details in this sort of public forum, I'll ask Jane, who's administering this for GCP, to provide your contact details to Ben so he can follow up with you. If you wouldn't mind picking that up as well, please, Jane. Thank you, and thanks for your question. And good to have Cambridge Past, Present, and Future here at this forum. I cannot see any more questions on this, but if there are any more questions for Ben, if you could post them in the chat in the next 5 minutes, please. And James, if you could take your hand down, that would be good. So that I know you haven't got. Thank you very much. So we've got, it's 20 past 7 now, and I'm going to move on to the next presentation, which is Anna on Southwest Travel Hub. Anna, if you're yes, I can see you got your camera on. So if you want to share your screen, I will mute myself, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. Good evening, everyone. Before I just go to the next slide. Before I update you on where we are at, a bit of a background information for those who may not be familiar with the scheme. Taking into consideration significant housing and employment growth around the M11 area, including Biomedical Campus, Trumpington Meadows, and West Cambridge. Cambridge Southwest Travel Hub, which is to be constructed on site to the west of the M11 Junction 11, has been designed to intercept motorists traveling into the city and reduce traffic congestion. So regarding the project update, planning permission to construct the travel hub was provisionally granted in June 2022, at which point it was passed to the Secretary of State for the final approval. The process was completed successfully in late July 2022. GCP is now procuring delivery of the scheme. Once the detailed design, including the full business case, have been completed, we seek the GCP Executive Board's approval to proceed to construction stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for that brief update. There's no questions in the chat for you, and I'll just check the hands. Second, participants. No, I'm not seeing any. Sorry, my screen's slightly frozen. No one's got their hand up as far as I can see. But again, Anna will be here for the next half hour or so. So if you do have any questions for Anna, please do post it. Oh, hang on.
There is one, yes.
Michael Staples has just put his hand up. Michael, I am unmuting you now. Michael, yes, you're unmuted. Please ask your question. Hi.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Michael.
Yeah. Well, actually, I wasn't expecting this to come up, so I've just thought I'd ask, because I'm just looking on sort of like the roadmap around the areas of Trumpington and things, and I just wondered why, if there are, and it's actually similar to the thing with Whittlesford, but I know we've moved on for that. There doesn't seem to be very much new trunk road building. So much of things like the developments around Trumpington and the developments around that sort of involve coming off at Madingley Road and things, they all seem to be going into the same kind of small road networks. Is there any kind of thought about kind of adding extra junctions and trunk roads to the M11, or around sort of skirting along the side of it almost, to kind of produce an extra road network around the edge? Because everything, I think, even down to Whittlesford, there's never any sense of kind of making the roads bigger to get people through. And when you're talking about kind of, and thank you for the answer. I'm not sure if the gentleman's still here, but thank you for the answer on Addenbrooke. So I appreciate that a lot. I just wondered why we're not looking in terms of I don't know the practicalities of the cost of kind of building rapid transit systems. So you actually have sort of a monorail kind of thing almost that's going across, just cutting across the top of land to take you into these major centres. So people can park outside of the science park, for example, then come in on a rapid transit that's literally going across the top of everything. So I don't know what the practicalities of it are. My ambitions are probably more than your budget, but I just wondered if these are things that people are thinking about, because there seems to be a lot of effort to cram a lot of stuff into the same road network, which is quite historic really, and a lot of stuff is feeding into or feeding off of old roads which couldn't cope with the traffic prior to all being built in the first place.
Great, thank you, Michael. And these questions. There's 2 or 3 questions in there, and they are somewhat beyond the Southwest Travel Hub. So, Peter, I think you've come back on maybe to take those questions. Michael.
Thanks, John. So, building roads means there's more traffic. So, roads induce traffic. Department for Transport knew that 25, 30 years ago. And so that's why there is a concern about putting more roads in, because otherwise we're just building more roads, just get more traffic onto our network, which makes it even busier. So we're trying to find different ways of using the network. And we're also trying to find different ways of promoting walking, cycling and public transport. So the scheme that Anna outlined earlier on, 2,000 spaces, additional park and ride, gives people the opportunity to get out of their vehicles before they get to the Cambridge network and use more sustainable sort of modes. There are lots of ideas around building different types of mass transit systems. We're progressing some busway schemes across the geography, and people have different views on them. If you start to build things above other things, then I'm quite sure that would generate significant differences of opinion across our geography. It is beyond our budget, and I think it's also a sort of very much a future look as to what cities might look like going forward. At the moment, we're focusing on, as I said, busways. We're focusing on cycle, walking, active travel improvements, including things like the park and ride improvements that deal with the challenge that we're facing over the next 5 to 10 years. It will be for others then to progress schemes above and beyond that in timetable terms.
Great, thank you, Peter. Rupert Gould, you have your hand up, so I'm assuming you've got a question for Anna on Southwest Travel Hub. Sorry, Rupert. Yes, Rupert, you're unmiked now, so you're unmuted now, Rupert. Please fire away.
Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, Rupert, yes.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to ask whether anyone's done any further travel studies or what the effect on the A10 is, because we've got the Foxton Travel Hub as well, the other side of us, and I'm in Harston. But I know my colleagues in Hawkston are equally concerned about what the impact on the travel coming up the A10, and I know there's meant to be a study being undertaken, but I haven't heard that it's being progressed.
So to answer your question, obviously on certainly schemes like Cambridge Southwest Travel Hub, so larger scheme scale, we are required to undertake traffic modelling. And obviously, we wouldn't progress without carrying one out. So this has been done during preliminary design stage. And obviously, when we move on to detailed design, we are still going to monitor what impact, obviously, what impact the new travel hub would have on the local network. So this information, well, I'm not sure whether it's available online, but certainly, as I said, the transport assessment, transport modelling has been carried out.
Yeah, and so it was considered as part of the planning application for the scheme, as you would expect, and there was no impact on the A10, with the majority of traffic coming from the M11. But you're right around the A10 corridor review. So that's a review that the Combined Authority are looking at. I don't have the latest information, but I'm sure if you contact them, they could give you an update in terms of a wider look on the transport issues along that corridor.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Anna. I'll just double check. I don't think anything else. There's some comments in there. So we've only got half an hour left. Please do, if you have any further questions in the next 5 minutes for Anna and Southwest Travel Hub, please post them in the chat. Otherwise, Chris is there with his camera on ready. So we're going to move on to the penultimate presentation from Chris Hart on greenways. Chris, I'll mute myself. If you share your screen, we can see that. Yeah, over to you, Chris.
Brilliant. I think I might need to switch the view. Let's hopefully, yeah, that's mine. Is that all coming through?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much. So, yeah, good evening, everyone. Yeah, so my name's Chris Hart. I'm the GCP project manager for a number of the greenway schemes, including 2 of the greenways that fall into the South Area Committee area. So, yeah, just I'm going to give. So the 2 schemes are the Sawston Greenway scheme and the Melbourne Greenway scheme. So I'll give a brief update on those 2 schemes. Just before I do move on, just in terms of kind of what taking a step back in terms of what greenways are. So we are looking to develop a network of 12 active travel routes connecting Cambridge and the surrounding villages and settlements. The aim of that collectively, and it's with the ambition is, very, very large. We're looking to deliver about 150 kilometres of kind of improvements for active travel users, so predominantly kind of pedestrians and cyclists, but also equestrian provision where we can and where it's sensible to do such. So yeah, the aim is to provide kind of safe, well-connected active travel links for those users, and make it easier, sensible, and safe to do so. And as well as sort of providing kind of improvements to kind of perhaps more long distance movements, it will provide kind of connectivity to those sort of important local journeys, so connecting schools, journeys to school, nursery runs, and that kind of thing. And obviously, once it's all delivered, it will provide sort of a great connectivity across the sort of greater Cambridge area. Just the sort of the slide shows kind of all of the routes, and we've commissioned WSP and Atkins to support us on the design and development of those schemes. So for the Sawston and Melbourne routes, we've got Atkins providing that support. So the Melbourne Greenway, just a sort of a brief update. So we've just concluded our public engagement on this Greenway. So I suspect some of you or many of you might have kind of responded to that or seen that. So we've closed that engagement at the end of October. So we're now kind of looking through the kind of the results of those kind of responses we've got. But yeah, just in summary, the kind of the focus for the improvements for the Melbourne Greenway are to provide focused improvements between kind of Hawkeston at the kind of the north end of the scheme, which is shown by kind of point 1 on the plan, all the way down to Royston in the south, which is on the bottom left hand side of the plan, point 7 and 8 on the plan. But because once it's all built, we'll actually, because there's already some existing provision for shared use provision in the wider area. So, for example, along the A10 and also onwards through sort of Trumpington and onwards to Cambridge, it will actually provide an end-to-end point of connectivity for kind of active travel users, predominantly walking and cycling. So our kind of focus now is obviously we're processing the results from the public engagement events we've been doing. We are looking at the Atkins team are focused on kind of environmental and ecological surveys. Some of the routes impact on landowners and tenants, so and landowners, tenants. So we've been engaging those. So we're doing sort of a lot of work in that area. We're working towards a planning and consenting strategy, and ultimately sort of leading us, putting all of that together. We'll be putting together an outline business case, and we'll have updates on scheme costings. So a lot of technical work underway at the moment, and this is the preliminary design stage of the project. The outcome of that will be presented at the March exec board in 2023. So that's the Melbourne Greenway. The Sawston Greenway, which is our proposed route, which would connect South Cambridge, so starting the Adam Brooks Biomedical Campus at the junction with Long Road and Robinson's Way. It would provide improvements onwards towards Great Shelford, Stapleford, and Sawston. And providing kind of improvements for active travel users, so along the route. So sort of where we've got space, we'll provide kind of segregated provision, and we think we're able to do that through the kind of the Adam Brooks site and Long Road Junction. We've also got a proposed off-road section, which is section 6, which goes through private land. So we've got Network Rail and other landowners to negotiate. But if that all goes ahead, then that will be provided online facility. Where we have got kind of space constraints, then we'd look to implement measures to reduce speed. So, for example, through Great Shelford, speed reduction measures, improvements to crossings for pedestrians and cyclists to sort of reinforce the safety of kind of walking through those areas. Just to say that we've now launched the public engagement for the Sawston route. So if you want to find out more information about the Sawston Greenway and you want to chat to some of our designers that have been designing the route, or myself, then we do. This is a bit of a plug for a couple of upcoming events, or you can obviously go online at the link at the bottom of that slide. But we've got a Zoom event tomorrow night, so we've got a couple of hours where we're going to go through almost a bit of a page turner, but looking at each of the sections of the route and what we're proposing. And we've also got an in-person event on the 30th, so next Wednesday at Sawston Mill Lane Pavilion, if you want to come and chat to us on a one-to-one basis. But the public engagement is open now until the 9th of December, so I would encourage people to participate in that if you're affected by that. And so obviously we want to hear back from you. Just to say on Sawston, we've been undertaking a lot of stakeholder engagement. So as I mentioned, we've got Network Rail, landowners, NMU users that we've been talking to just to sort of mop up kind of comments from those stakeholders. That's do come along, or do go to the website and provide some commentary. Just a bit like the Melbourne Greenway, in terms of our next steps, there's a lot of technical work that's going to be undertaken. So technical surveys, engagement, planning and consenting strategies, outline business case, and obviously public engagement reporting. So like Melbourne, so both our schemes, Melbourne and the Sawston Greenway, will be going back to the exec board in March and see the joint assembly preceding that. So that's a bit of a summary overview of those two greenways that are in the south area.
Thank you, Chris. I'll just come to you in a second because there is at least one question for you. Rupert, you'll see Anna is typing away your questions there in the chat on South West Travel Hub. And Ben, there's a question for you at 7:26 in the Q&A from Michael Kilpatrick on Whittlesford. If you're able to pick that up and please answer it in the chat, that would be great. So if you take your screen down, please. Oh, you have done now, Chris. There is a question from Joan Monk asking, will there be lighting along the greenways, especially in the winter months?
That's a really, really good question. So we're, as part of this stage of the design for both the Melbourne and the Sawston Greenway, we are looking at kind of what the lighting strategies will be for each. It will likely differ depending on a number of situations. I think probably our starting principle is that we'll only light parts of the route where there's already a provision for, so like in urban areas where we've got rural sections, we're not planning to light that as a starting principle. However, we need to understand kind of safety issues and balance that with environmental considerations. But we are looking at, we are proposing kind of the use of solar studs or reflectors to kind of guide those sort of dark, those kind of routes. And I take that, the point is, during winter months, now at 4 o'clock it's dark, and obviously we want to be encouraging as many people to use the routes as possible. So we need to mop up all of that in terms of, so for each route we're still defining the lighting strategy, but that's the sort of starting principles, I'd say, for those two routes.
Thank you. And there's a couple of hands up, but just quickly, George, it appears that Ben's asking permission to answer Michael's question. I don't know if there's anything you need to do to enable him to do that, or I'm misreading the situation.
I was going to try and type the answer. So what I can do is I can get back to you, Michael, with a sort of a fuller answer. So I must have pressed the wrong button.
Sure. Okay. Well, take that one offline, please, or George, if you can enable it in some way in the background as we've moved on from Whittlesford. But it's an important question. So thank you, Ben. Rupert Gould, yeah, I think you were asking something of Anna, but if you've got a question for Chris on the greenways, I will unmute you now. Okay, Rupert. Yes, you're unmuted, Rupert.
Hi, Chris. Yes. We have a question in Harston because we've got two greenways going through Harston. I think one up the High Street and one going across a rural stretch of land. And therefore, I think there's a slight doubt as to whether the rural section will get much use, in that if it's used as a commuter route, it will go up the main road.
No, thank you for that comment. And yeah, I mean, I think the reason why we've proposed the kind of the offline route through the private land there is because we're very constrained in terms of the A10, in terms of what provision we can provide there for kind of active travel users. It's a very constrained environment. There's lots of frontages along the A10 in Harston itself, and we think that providing a totally offline route away from that busy kind of environment will have a lot of benefit. So I mean, in terms of like numbers, this applies to all the greenways, but we are undertaking traffic surveys, monitoring, just to provide a bit of a proxy for kind of what's going on at the moment. I appreciate, there's not a route there at the moment, so it's difficult to do that, but for each of the greenways, we are developing an outline business case, which will look at potential numbers using the greenways, and that will obviously be fed into business case. And so it'll all be articulated there. And the OBC, the outline business case, will be presented as part of the March Exec Board paper. So it'll all be set out there. So we're aware of
We quite like the option to look at alternatives because you go to the least populous side of the village. If you went to the more populated side of the village, you might actually pick up more commuters rather than get used solely for social purposes. And I think there are two different issues here. There's the commuter bicyclist and the social bicyclist, and they don't necessarily go on the same path because one goes at 20 miles an hour, the one goes at about 10 miles an hour, and it's completely different characteristics.
I know that, and it's a good point.
Okay, thank you, Rupert, and thank you, Chris. We'll move on. Richard Williams, I'm going to unmute now. Sorry.
Thanks
yes,
so much.
Richard.
Thanks very much, Chris. It's a question about the Sawston Greenway. On your first slide on the Greenway map, which obviously is a great project, the Greenways, and I think we're all behind them. But just at the Sawston spur, the second spur that stopped at the business park, I saw that there were two other stops, but they weren't in green. They were in sort of grey, and that was Whittlesford and then Whittlesford Parkway. So again, talking about all the things, really, it all ties up. The travel hub, obviously connecting the Whittlesford Parkway station to the travel to the Greenway network would obviously be very, very beneficial from an active travel perspective. So I don't know if you can say a little bit more about what that sort of grey line that went from the end of the Sawston Greenway spur at the business park to Whittlesford and then on to Whittlesford Parkway actually signifies, because it would be fantastic if we could get it properly extended all the way down to the station.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, the proposal will end. The Greenway proposal will end at the end. On the A1301 at the junction with Mill Lane, where we are tying in with an existing NCN route, so we'd almost help to provide that almost continuous facility there. So at the moment, we're not proposing to do anything more than that as part of this particular greenway or this particular stage.
Okay, thank you, Richard, and thank you very much. I'm going to have, we've got 15. Rupert, if you wouldn't mind, if you've got another question, or unless it's a legacy hand, popping it in the chat, please. I'm conscious that we've only got 15 minutes left and we've still got one presentation to do. So yeah, please do. And Chris, just keep an eye if Rupert or anyone else is going to pop a question relating to the greenways in the chat for you and pick it up. And apologies, but just quite a lot to get through tonight. So Paul, are you there? There you are. Yes. So this is our final presentation. Thank you, everybody who's stuck with us. This is the last of there's the 6 presentations this evening, project updates. Paul on Cycle Plus. Paul, if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen, please. And there we can see. Okay. Yeah, just go into presentation mode. Then the floor's yours.
Great. Is that working for you?
Yes, perfect.
Great, okay, thanks. Hi there, everyone. I'm Paul Vanderbolt, Project Manager for the Greater Cambridge Partnership, and I just wanted to introduce the Cycling Plus projects to this forum this evening. So, going back a few years, the GCP consulted on a number of routes that were put forward within the Cycling Plus programme, and following consideration of the consultation responses, 2 routes have been put forward to the next stage of design. So they're shown on the map here, and one of those routes, the longer route here, shown in red, extends from Addenbrooke's roundabout up to Coldham's Lane roundabout, and the other route extends from Hills Road College up to the Catholic Church Junction in the centre of Cambridge. So in terms of what we intend to do on these routes, so as the name suggests, one of the first considerations is to try and improve safety and convenience of cycling, and we aim to do that by providing much wider segregated cycle lanes along the length of both routes, both inbound and outbound, both ways along the route. We're also looking at all of the junctions along the routes and trying to provide segregation where possible, separate cycling facilities to cross the junction where it's possible to do so, where we have the space. The other thing we need to look at is to provide an enhanced environment for walking, both across the routes and along the routes. So again, we're looking at all of the crossing points on the routes, making sure they're in the right place. And putting kind of pedestrians first in the design at all of the junctions as well, ensuring there's no kind of major conflicts either with the new cycling infrastructure that we're proposing or with traffic. And then obviously on the 1134 route, which is the Coldham's to Addenbrooke's, we're looking at enhancing the landscaping because that corridor has many trees and kind of verges. The other route, the Hills Road route, is a slightly different environment. It's more of an urban environment, but we'll look at that route and see what we can provide. And all of this is kind of enabling the programme, the overall GCP programme, looking at creating a modal shift away from private car by providing enhanced infrastructure for walking and cycling and other modes of transport, and all that looking to obviously reduce congestion in the city. In terms of timelines, so as I mentioned, we're at quite an early stage in design process. So my designers are currently kind of finalising a number of concept designs, and hopefully we'll have those kind of finalised by kind of Christmas time. Then we've got to finalise some traffic surveys, do a bit of modelling, and kind of we'll have kind of a full appraisal of those designs in kind of early spring. We then look to do a consultation in May, June. So next summer, late spring, early summer, will be coming out to the public, and at that stage we'll have a number of early concept designs that we'll be consulting on. Following that consultation, we obviously need to appraise the consultation feedback and prepare the outline case, which we'll take back to the GCP board in October 2023. So happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Paul. There is a question in the chat from David Plank from the Trumpington Residents Association. So the Trumpington Residents Association earliest question on Cycling Plus was not answered. So apologies, David, it wasn't, but I was saving it for this agenda item, as Paul is our presenter on Cycling Plus. So they the Residents Association in Trumpington criticised Cycling Plus proposals for Trumpington as sidelining walkers. Will there be a response to the detailed points we, the Residents Association, has made and the amended proposals? We are concerned that unqualified references are made to the Cycling Plus proposals, for example, in making connections. Will the proposals be revisited? So that's the question, Paul.
So I saw the question. I'm assuming that refers to one of the Cycling Plus options that was taken forward at that consultation in 2021. But as I kind of alluded to in the presentation, so we're not taking the Trumpington Road option forward. We are obviously concentrating on the Hills Road and the 1134 schemes. In terms of the general principle, though, so when we design schemes, in terms of the hierarchy of design, we always look at pedestrians first, cycling second. So we go from most vulnerable to kind of the least vulnerable road user when we design. So that's why I mentioned, whilst the scheme is labelled Cycling Plus, it's why one of the aims of the scheme is also to look at facilities for pedestrians, especially crossing points and kind of interaction between pedestrians and cyclists, because they're kind of likely to interact at various places along the scheme.
Thank you, Paul. Michael Stables, I see you've got your hand up. I'll come to you in a second, but Councillor Davis has posted a question in the chat for you, Paul, which is, can I ask which stakeholders you will be talking to about the Sainsbury's to Addenbrooke's Cycle Plus projects? And she goes on to say, on the Sawston Greenway, you didn't talk to local councils until the scheme was about to go out to consultation. Will you take a different approach this time?
So the answer to that is yes. So as I mentioned, I've literally just in the last week or so seen some of the concept designs from the designers, and I've gone back with my own comments first of all, just to make sure that that was kind of the first check. So the next stage is that I would look to engage with kind of internal stakeholders, so people working in the county council, such as the road signals team, the road safety team, the signals team, and several other team members to get their view. And then we plan to go out to kind of local councillors. We want to speak to Addenbrooke's, the cycling representatives at Addenbrooke's, and the local councillors from the area. So
Thank you.
That will take place as soon as possible, really. As soon as we've got a set of designs that we are happy with internally, we'll take them for some external engagement.
Okay, thank you. And hopefully
before we go out to consultation.
Right, thank you. Sorry, I kept talking over you there, but thank you, and hopefully that gives you some reassurance, Sam. So thank you, Paul. Right, there are no more questions in the chat on Cycling Plus. So Michael, your hand is up. If you could just, I'll mute you. If you could briefly ask your question of Paul, please, because we are almost vastly approaching 8 o'clock. Michael, you are muted now. Michael, please ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Just one thing. So it's really to do with obviously I think for most motorists there is a caution anywhere around cyclists and pedestrians. It's just a factor of driving. Just one thing, I'm always very, very cautious in cities. You have to have 360-degree vision, and I'm just somewhat concerned when I'm travelling around in Cambridge that there are a lot of somewhat confusing situations with cycleways ending and the cyclists apparently not being aware that there is vehicles present. You get a lot of red light jumpers, you get a lot of that sort of thing going on. And I just think in literature and things, whilst it's very important to realise that many people using motor vehicles are perfectly entitled to do so, they're perfectly entitled to make progress. And that while, I fully agree with having separated cycle lanes and a great deal of caution around, particularly pedestrians, actually, cyclists and so on, for people who are driving large vehicles, lorries and things, trying to do their work, people trying to get to work and back, that everything needs to kind of work together. And sometimes in some of the language and the things I read, it's somewhat disappointing to see that there is a hierarchy of safety, but there isn't a hierarchy of importance or sort of entitlement, shall we say. So just real caution, I think, needs to be exercised in what is being expressed to people. That the fact that you've got a cycle lane that ends into a road doesn't mean people shouldn't be looking over the right shoulder just to make sure that they're not going to get hit, because it doesn't matter what your priority is. If you get hit, it's going to hurt. And lots of people are involved in that. A driver hitting a pedestrian, it will live with them for their life. And if things aren't set up correctly, and I used to be myself pro 20-mile-an-hour speed limits until I started driving in London, when I thought actually these 20-mile-an-hour speed limits are a disaster, because you haven't got the proper flow. You haven't got a proper flow of traffic going there. So my question is really, or a request really, that when a lot of these things are being discussed, that there is, as you say, a hierarchy, but that caution needs to be given to kind of saying this is now our priority, and anybody trying to drive their car or van or bus around is sort of, I think you get the gist of what I'm saying anyway, that I support a lot of the things that you're doing for the safety benefit, but it does work both ways. Cyclists, pedestrians, so on have to be reminded that they are also a part of the flow of traffic.
Yeah. No, thank you, Michael. I mean, they are important safety points. Paul, I'll just sort of allow you, because we are almost at the hour. If just in terms of, given the fact you're at the early design stage,
I somewhat agree with the points raised, and obviously, I agree that cyclists obviously do need to be careful when they're around the traffic. The point of some of these new schemes is to try and allow a bit more separation, and also, probably more importantly, we're aiming to kind of provide more consistency across the city. So in terms of design, so consistency of design, and just getting that separation and making sure that where there are interactions between the different modes, then those interactions can be safe. So along the A1134, for example, there are the Cherry Hinton roundabout, for example, is not particularly safe when you approach it on a bike, especially if you have a kind of a lorry just behind you or next to you. So we're looking to address those kind of issues. And we also recognise, though, that the 1134 that is part of the ring road, so traffic will remain on that road as part of the ongoing, even making connections road hierarchy review. That road looks to remain part of the ring road, so it will retain traffic, and we therefore need to be sensitive to that and ensure that kind of that falls within our design considerations.
Thank you very much, Paul. Right, it's 2 minutes to 8 o'clock, so I'm going to draw the meeting to a close. The statistics are telling me that we've answered 65 questions in the chat, and we've had a lot more of those with people putting their hands up. So firstly, thank you to the 5 presenters tonight for your presentations and your questions, but most of all, thank you for people in the community, councillors, parish councillors, resident associations and other interested members of the public for giving up 2 hours of your time this evening, and for your very thought-provoking questions, and for engaging with GCP. Hopefully it's been informative for you. We did try and get through as many of the questions as possible. There's a few points to follow up on, that the questions have been taken offline and people who couldn't see unanswered questions. I see that that Chris is still typing away an answer to one of the Greenways questions in there. So thanks everybody, and I will bid you a good evening. These, as I say, the recording of this will go on the YouTube channel, and these community forums are biannual. So looking forward to seeing you again at the next series in the spring. Very much. Thank you very much, and I'll bid you a good evening.